Broadcasting live from Lothal. Good morning, Lothal. It's the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome back once again to another special edition of Good Morning Lothal, the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. I'm Pete Salas along with
Rolando Zamora.
How are we doing, Rolly?
I'm good. This was a busy week, a very productive one, but it was good. I can't say I don't have any negative comments, anything negative to say about it. How have you been?
I've been not too bad, man. There was a lot of Star Wars content this week, which was
seriously, right?
Which was awesome. Which is probably why you guys were wondering why I said a special edition, because today we will not be talking about an episode of Rebels. In fact, there was so much extra Star Wars content this week, that Rolly and I decided we were just gonna throw together a special. So today we will be talking about the amazing series Tales of the Jedi that dropped on Disney Plus this week, and also the recapping the last episode of Andor. So that's what we've got planned for today. So if you're here looking for Rebels, I'm sorry you're gonna have to wait a week, but hey, we've got some really good Star Wars content here for you anyway. So before we get to anything else, I just want to please remind everyone to like, share, subscribe, and rate. It's very helpful and we really appreciate it. So, Rolly, what's happening around the galaxy?
Let's see what's happening this week in Star Wars.
Okay, so we got some really cool news this week in the galaxy. I know it's been relatively quiet for the past month or so, but some interesting tidbits happened this weekend. I want to get into them. First and foremost, everybody knows the Ahsoka live action series is dropping sometime early next year. I forget the exact date on that, but I know it is earlier in the year. So talking to Entertainment Weekly, Ashley Eckstein actually gave some commentary that she recently visited the set of Ahsoka.
Oh, wow. As
you guys are well aware, Ashley Eckstein is the voice of Ahsoka in the animated series, including Tales of the Jedi, which we're going to talk about today. And Rosario, on set of the Ahsoka show, this was actually the first time she got to meet and interact with Rosario Dawson, who of course plays live action Ahsoka. So I know this is something the fans were looking forward to. So much looking forward to that, of course, the number one question asked on the internet, as per this information, is she going to make a cameo in the Ahsoka series? So she did give some commentary on that because she wanted to squash rumors and not get people overhyped. She claims, I'm going to say claims, right? Because, she could be giving us a white lie on this one.
Right.
That she was simply on set as part of a set visit and not to make a cameo. But she also did say that it would actually be her dream come true for her if she got to do a cameo, and she is not at all opposed to appearing in any live action Star Wars content. So I don't know, Pete. I have a sneaking suspicion she was there for a cameo. It'd be a sham, in my opinion, if you had an Ahsoka live action show and you didn't actually get to feature Ashley on there, as at least in some kind of cameo role. Right, I think she's very well deserving of that honor. So I'm hoping that she's just kind of like trying to cover it up and she actually does show up somewhere.
Yeah, no, that would be really cool if she is kind of playing all of us, it's not like it hasn't happened before where people are like, no, I'm definitely not in that, and then all of a sudden they're in that. But the first thing I thought of when I read that was like, it's one of those photo ops where they just kind of like, yeah, we're getting along, even though at the very beginning when Rosario was announced as Ahsoka, I know that there was some fan backlash as far as like, well, why not Ashley? Like, she should have been it. Like, she's been Ahsoka since day one, and why are we recasting and whatnot? And even Ashley was kind of like, she was very diplomatic about it, and she was like, well,
yes,
they had their reasons and whatever, and Rosario's going to do a really great job. And to her credit, she played it exactly the way she needed to play it. But to finally see them together on I guess in a picture. Is there a picture out yet? I haven't seen it, but
I don't think there was actual former picture, but if there is, I missed it.
Okay. Well, it's just one of those things that just had to happen too. Almost like she's giving her blessing to the Ahsoka series that's going on without her. So I don't know. This has all kinds of cool potential behind it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And as much as I love Ashley, to Rosario Dawson's defense, she was casted, for all intents and purposes, she was fan casted because she has such a likeness and appearance to Ahsoka. And Rosario's a great actress, and I'm glad that she was chosen. If you follow Rosario Dawson on social media, she's very, very supportive of the Ahsoka character, not just the work that she's doing, but she just commented on Tales of the Jedi and such. So I do recognize from Rosario that there is such a strong need from her point, from her stance to carry on the torch that Ashley Eckstein has always carried on for Ahsoka still to this day. Ashley treats that character so near and dear to her heart, and I think Rosario Dawson recognizes this, and she's trying to do the same because you know the Star Wars fandom, you guys. It's a tough one.
Right, exactly.
And here's one that I was really excited for to finish off our news in Star Wars this week. So the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga, which we have spoken about before on the show, they're actually re-releasing it on November 1st as part of a Galactic Bundle edition. And the exciting part about this is it's coming with 30 more characters featured across the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, the Book of Boba Fett, Andor, which is so fresh. We haven't even finished the first season and they already have storyline appearing in that game. Clone Wars, and the reason I need to get the downloadable content for this, Rebels. As soon as I saw the Rebels characters on the trailer that they released for this game, I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, I played the game for 15 minutes when I raved about it earlier this year. I just never got back to it, but as soon as I saw the Rebels characters, I'm like, I'm getting back to it. I have to play it. Rebels is just so near and dear to me.
Excellent.
And like I mentioned too, I know that this is a re-release of the called the Galactic Edition, but for any of you guys out there that already has the original Skywalker Saga version, everything that's releasing extra on this game will be released as downloadable content, so everybody will be able to participate.
Sweet. So would this be the first time we see Rebels characters in Lego form?
I believe so, because when I saw them, I know I wasn't the only one that was excited. My Star Wars Twitter feed was littered with Rebels fans talking about the characterizations that they used on some of the figures.
Okay. So
I feel that it is the first time that we will see them.
Okay, sweet.
Let's get into some birthdays for this week. First on our list, we have Nika Futterman. She was born October 25th. She voices Asajj Ventress in the Clone Wars. That is an awesome character. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. I've spoken about her before in Dark Disciple, which are Lost Clone Wars episodes, and that actually gives closure to Ventress's character. I wish that was a character we were able to talk about more on the show. Unfortunately, she's not part of the Rebels series, but if for whatever reason you guys out there haven't watched Clone Wars, you haven't finished Clone Wars, there are some excellent episodes towards the end of Clone Wars that heavily feature Ventress post-Sith Lord or post-apprentice to Dooku that really show the change of character in her, where I'm not saying she goes to full light side, but she does leave the Sith. So some really awesome episodes there if you guys haven't checked them out. Next on our list, we have Angus McInnes. I hope I'm saying his name right. October 27th, he plays John Dutch Vander, also known as Gold Leader in Star Wars A New Hope.
Oh, wow, okay.
And he actually shows up in Rogue One. Also, if you guys remember, it is an actual cut from Star Wars A New Hope that they spliced into Rogue One. So he was at the Battle of Scarif. I think he was still Gold Leader at that point. Do you remember that part, Pete?
I do. Now that you mentioned that it was they used old footage and cleaned it up to put it into Rogue One. I remember hearing that story now.
Yeah, I remember that character specifically. I was never familiar with any of the original X-Wing or Y-Wing pilots that weren't named Luke Skywalker, Wedge, and Biggs, Luke's best friend. But as soon as you see the guy, you recognize exactly who he is, and you're like, oh yeah, I do remember that they cut him into Rogue One. So again, happy birthday to him. And then to round out our list, we have Gwendolyn Christie, October 28th. She plays Captain Phasma in the sequel trilogy.
I was very disappointed to see. I was very disappointed to see that her character didn't make it past the first sequel.
Yeah,
Wait, no,
I didn't want to say it.
She did make it to the second movie, didn't she?
Yeah. So
Okay,
in
I'm
the
sorry.
first one, they put her in in the Force Awakens. They put her in the trash compactor as per Finn. She does show up in The Last Jedi, and that's where she duels Finn and ultimately falls to her demise. But yeah, I was gonna hesitate to say anything bad about that character, but I do unfortunately, sadly, have to agree. She easily had the coolest stormtrooper,
Yeah, definitely.
gear we had ever and probably will ever see in the Star Wars universe. And I thought that character was gonna be a badass, and it just.
Yeah, no, they
We unfortunately
really,
didn't get to see that.
honestly, like I don't like to really criticize very often, but that the ball was definitely dropped on that character. There was so much potential there, especially because of the actress that's underneath the helmet. Like we fell in love with her in Game of Thrones, another Game of Thrones crossover, and just she has this presence on screen. So when I heard that she was cast in Star Wars to play basically like the right hand of the new big baddie. And she barely had any scenes, and she just, I don't know, it was missed potential there in my opinion. So if anything, you can look at this as me being positive about the character, because I really dug her. I really dug the look. Just it didn't just pan out the way I thought it would.
Yeah, I agree. But happy birthday to Gwendolyn Christie,
Nonetheless, yes.
Okay, and we do actually have an anniversary that I do want to mention this week, October 30th, which is today, the day we're recording. This is the anniversary of Disney officially acquiring Lucasfilm from George Lucas. So that for me is pretty awesome. I know some fans are like, no, Disney ruined Star Wars, but I disagree. We have so much great Disney content. Star Wars content that Disney has produced. So including Rebels. Don't forget, Rebels is post Disney acquiring Lucasfilm, so to say.
Yes, it's definitely a significant day in the history of Star Wars, so you can't overlook it. Okay, so if that rounds out that segment, before we get to Tales of the Jedi, let's hit up Andor first. So the last episode was episode 8, and it was called Narkina 5.
In this episode, just to kind of give a brief summary, obviously the implications of what we saw in the previous episode was that Cassian got wrongfully arrested and sent to prison for 6 years instead of 6 months, which what his quote-unquote crime should have merited. But post I already forgot the name of the planet, where the heist happened.
Aldhani?
But yes, post Aldhani incident, the Empire went on code red alert. So anything that was a previous crime, they said, we're going to multiply the sentence rate by X amount, including people that were already incarcerated, which is incredibly sad, and it's something that we touch on in this episode. So jumping into it, the prison itself on Narkina 5, I think when Cassian first gets there, he's kind of like scoping it out, right? He's already preparing, how am I going to get out of here? Mm-hmm. Basically testing the fences the way the Raptors do on Jurassic Park, so to say. Right. And as the episode progresses, you just see it on his face, in the hopelessness. It starts to kick in, and there's one scene specifically where he's standing in line where they're moving the prisoners to some other area, and he's just like gone. Like, you see it on his face. I'm sure you remember that scene. Yeah. So for having so few lines in this episode, I thought Diego Luna killed the acting in this one.
Yeah, definitely.
And what did you think about that cameo appearance by Andy Serkis?
Yes, that was unexpected completely. Huge fan of Andy Serkis. Huge fan. If you guys don't know him, he's been in everything. He is a legacy Star Wars character actor, because he was Snoke in the sequel trilogy. Yes. But he's mostly, you would know him as Gollum from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He's been in Black Panther. He's part of the Marvel universe.
Yes.
He's a motion capture guy. He's been he was King Kong in one of the last iterations of it. So this guy is just a fantastic, and not to mention he's just a great actor all the way around. He's got this intensity about him that I just love it when he shows up on screen. Was not expecting him at all, so that was really cool to see him.
It's kind of crazy how that guy, because would you say he has more like motion capture acting as opposed to live action or on-screen acting? I haven't seen all of his work.
I would say so. I think that it's, especially early on, it was all motion capture, and like he was very animated with his body, so I guess it was perfect the way that he was being used as far as Hollywood. But in more recent years, I have seen him actually on screen. In fact, come to think of it, I think the first time I actually saw his face on screen was when there was a flashback in one of the Lord of the Rings where we met Smeagol before he had transformed, and he played Smeagol obviously because he voiced him. So that was one of the first times that I saw his actual face on screen, if I'm not mistaken. At least
because the only reason I asked that is because when I first saw him like really on screen a lot was in Black Panther when he played Claw.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like blown away because his acting was insane. And I was thinking like, wait a minute, this guy is a motion capture like actor predominantly, because he seems like he should be on screen like on everything. Like if I was casting for a movie, I feel like I would want to cast that guy for everything. So man, talk about range.
He's definitely got some presence to him. I forgot, I'm looking at his filmography now. He was also in the Planet of the Apes movies. He was Caesar, the main ape, and probably other ones as well. But yeah, man, this guy goes back now that I'm looking at him as far as stuff that he's done. So he's an all-around great actor, both voice work, character work, everything. The guy's he does it all, so that's pretty cool.
And then talking about cameos, this one I totally missed. This is something I had read on the internet afterwards. You got to be not insanely, but like you got to be like a real Rogue One fan to have caught this one. There's a character by the name of Melshi who was in prison with Cassian, and he ends up being part of the Rogue One team at the Battle of Scarif. So I'm curious to see if that's just a cameo, if there's going to be some more dialogue between him and Cassian on their way out, because obviously we know there's going to be some type of prison break that Cassian's either going to organize or he's going to be part of. So I'm curious to see if we see more of that ultimately leads to them teaming up at the Battle of Scarif.
I saw that note on social media earlier this week, and I didn't recognize him. I guess it didn't strike me as like, oh wow, that's that same dude from Rogue One. So it has to lead into it. I mean, it would be too much of a coincidence. And why add a character in the Andor series that shows up in Rogue One so prominently if they weren't going to like end up creating some sort of team up?
Yeah, and speaking, I know I didn't write this in my notes, I just remembered though. Speaking of Prison Break, I don't think we talked about this in last week's episode when we were talking about Ezra's parents escaping prison, but did you suddenly watch the episode with like a hint of hope? Like piece together, like, wait a minute, are Ezra's parents going to show up as part of this prison break?
And you know what? Now that you mention that, yes, I did have that. That would have been really cool if there was some sort of a reference to Ezra's parents being in that prison.
And in my mind, I was thinking like, there's no way it was a coincidence that we saw and analyzed that episode, and now we're watching this one. So I didn't get hyped because I was like, I know they're not doing a lot of crossover stuff for Andor, but I was thinking like maybe, just maybe it'll happen, but we didn't see them, unfortunately. Maybe there's a hint of hope we see them in the next episode. If we don't, it's not something that's going to bother me. I just thought it was like, it's too much of a coincidence that we just happened to see that episode of Rebels going into this Andor episode.
Yeah, no, that is what's that called when the universe speaks to you? Some sort of a
exactly.
I'm forgetting the word right now, but anyway.
And then speaking of cameos, this is a big one, but we knew he was going to come out based off of the trailer. We finally got to see Saul Guerrero in Andor, which was a very interesting meeting and conversation What did you think of that scene?
Did not go the way that I thought it was going to go. I really thought that, yes, the first time that these two were on screen together, there was going to be some immediate, like, okay, this is the plan, and now we're going to kick it into high gear. But there was some resistance, and I guess I don't know why I'm surprised by it, but I was, because, you know, Saw Gerrera is one of those militant kind of he's very careful. He's very careful.
Like a radical.
Right. A radical, and he's very careful with who he does business with, so it only makes sense that he was hesitant and did not go for the carrot that Lothal was dangling in front of him.
Yeah, and I thought it was kind of crazy too, because from the get-go, when Mon Mothma was referring to, I have a partner or somebody that I think can help us, I thought she was referring to Saw Gerrera, and then it turned out no, Lothal knows Saw Gerrera, and Luthen's way of thinking as far as the uprising of the rebellion, I thought was very much in the same logic as maybe the way Saw Gerrera was going to see things. And sure enough, they're not on the same page. And it's talking about who they're doing business with. I thought it was real interesting that Saw Gerrera was like, no, the person that you're asking me to do business with, he's a separatist. Mm-hmm. So Saw Gerrera is like very much still like, for whatever reason, thinking there's a difference between the Republic and the separatists, and there's not. Right. We're already post Order 66, the Emperor's in full control. Like, that just goes to show you how much power Palpatine has, that there's people still in existence that think that the war they had, that there was actually two sides to it. No, it was completely one-sided by one person.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, dude, this was just a really dark episode. Not like the other ones have been like happy-go-lucky, but every single scene in the prison, it was just so hopeless was the best word that you've used for this one. Not to mention the fact that, like, I think this might have been the first suicide that we've seen in a Star Wars property, like where that guy just kind of jumped into the tracks there and he killed himself, the prisoner. The floor has got some sort of, it's heated, it's a heat element, and it's got some sort of electromagnetism behind it. So in one scene, they're allowed to mill around in the corridors and the hallways, but once the alarm goes off, they've got 30 seconds to get into their pod, and there's no bars, there's no gates, there's nothing, because at night when the alarm is set or whatnot, or if they walk off of their pod and onto the platform, it's basically going to fry them. So there's a scene where one prisoner just couldn't take it anymore, and he just jumped to his death. And just the utter way that the rest of the prisoners were like, nah, not again. Like, you know, like it wasn't like it wasn't shock. It wasn't disappointment. It wasn't sadness. It was just like, okay, now this is going to somehow ruin our day tomorrow. And it's just, there was just so much hopelessness in this episode. It again goes to show just how different this series is from anything else that you've ever seen in Star Wars.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's just still surprising. We're how many episodes in? Eight episodes in. Sorry. And each episode just continues to surprise me at how different this show is and how surreal it is in the Star Wars universe. It's very intense. Yeah, so and then the last thing from this episode that I wanted to touch on was we do end up getting back to Ferrix. There's issues with Cassian's mom, Marva. Bix goes to check on her, and she basically starts growing concerned because clearly she's not in a good spot. So Bix, who we saw communicate very early on in the series with Lothal, I don't know how she has that line of communication established, but she ends up getting arrested because she goes to communicate with Lothal again. But at this point, Dedra is very much onto this spy network, so to say, that the rebels have started. So almost instantly, now that there's such a strong presence of Imperials on Ferrix, as soon as Bix attempts to send out the signal to Lothal, they go arrest the shop owner wherever the signal machine is at. Mm-hmm. And I guess he ends up giving up her name to the Imperials because he's being tortured, unfortunately. Yeah. So they immediately bring Bix in, and now obviously they're trying to get to Cassian. But what's also funny is they don't even realize that they already captured Cassian.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Bix. That's a character that I just want a little bit more information on.
Right. So a very intriguing way to end this episode leading into the next one. So I definitely look forward to that, talking about that next week. So Rolly, why don't we put a button on Andor and let's jump into Tales of the Jedi, because we have 6 amazing little tiny micro episodes to talk about right now.
So for starters, Pete, I just got to say out of the gate, I was scared that these were shorts. I was like, they showed the trailer for Tales of the Jedi, and I was just like, please, like, how can you only give us 15 minutes of this stuff? There's could be so much we're gonna get. Wow, and that just goes to show how much you can tell in such a short amount of time.
Yep.
And I was just blown away by this series. I want more. I knew I was gonna want more, but it was still so, like, I didn't expect this level of hype, production, whatever you want to call it. I need more.
Definitely. I don't know about you, but I blew through them in the 2 hours or whatever it took to watch it. Like, I didn't even pause. I wanted to like savor it. Let me make it last all weekend or whatnot. But I was like, no way, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So
I was surprised by the structure too.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I really thought it was going to be like half the series was the Ahsoka and then the other half was Dooku. But I love the way that they interwove them to create an overall full story arc between the two of them for the 6 episodes. So let's jump into it. Episode 1 was called Life and Death.
Yeah, so just to give a brief synopsis on Life and Death, this is the Baby Ahsoka episode, which I was extremely excited to watch. But in this episode, Ahsoka Tano goes through a rite of passage during her childhood, but experiences unexpected results. And for everybody out there that's already seen Tales of the Jedi, we kind of knew what was going to happen in this episode based off of what we saw in the trailer. But let's just talk about it. Nonetheless, I don't know about you, Pete, but I basically need Disney to make a Baby Ahsoka toy / doll before Christmas so that I can buy it for my Christmas gift to myself. Because if there's such a thing as male baby fever, I think I have it now. But it has to be a Baby Ahsoka.
That's funny, man.
Yeah, I cannot undermine the cuteness factor that they had with Ahsoka in this episode. First and foremost, let's just get that out of the way before we get into talking about the Force and such.
Yes, she was freaking adorable.
Yeah, so getting into the episode, I loved how we finally got like a backstory on a character pre-Jedi Temple, pre-anything, like, because it's kind of weird because I always kind of presume like these babies are not stolen, but the parents don't have any say-so in it and they're just taken essentially. And I didn't really get that feeling from this. I felt like we got like a really good backstory on Ahsoka's connection with her mother and a little bit more of the Togruta race and what it entails in their villages. So I just love how we got a deeper background on a Jedi that we know of and that there's actual history there with the family, and it's not just a matter of children being outright kidnapped in the same way the Inquisitors kidnap children. I'm glad that there is still a connection there with the mother, and I almost want to say that that's something that Ahsoka ends up carrying through to her future. She's so brave. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. Obviously, let's talk about how she's stolen by that creature when she goes on a hunt with her mother, and the mother's obviously distraught, but Ahsoka, she's able to connect with this creature using the Force in the same way that we see Ezra connecting with creatures in Rebels, to where she basically tames the beast and she rides it back to the encampment, and to everybody's surprise, they're just like, I think even the mother was like, how is this possible?
Right.
And I forget the name of the older woman, I guess call her like the village shaman, so to say.
Yeah.
But she's basically the one that tells the mom, Ahsoka is Jedi.
Right. I took a couple notes on these episodes, but the one that I wanted to ask you about is, I guess I've just kind of gotten it in my head that the Jedi Order, Jedi, is more of like a religion than anything else. So I found it interesting that or a belief system. But I found it interesting that she referred to her as Ahsoka as Jedi instead of like Ahsoka has the Force or is strong with the Force or something to allude to that. Because I just kind of always thought that like when the younglings they go for Jedi training to become a Jedi. But
yes,
the way that it was worded, it was kind of like, no, she is a Jedi already. And that just kind of struck me as a little odd. I don't know if you felt the same way.
Yeah, I think I've already accepted kind of for a while. I've thought of that before, don't get me wrong, but I've accepted to where like these force sensitive children, force wielders in general, I would think to the general public that they just instantly refer to them as Jedi regardless of whatever type of formal training they may have already had or whether they passed or failed. If they're wielding the Force, I think that they still refer to them as Jedi instead of Force wielders. That's kind of my take on that one. So I think that's why she just immediately refers to her like that. And, you know, because sure enough, we come to find out in the future that Ahsoka leaves the Order, as we saw in the Clone Wars. So we know she doesn't necessarily carry that title anymore. But, you know, nonetheless, I think because of who Ahsoka is, she doesn't turn to the dark side or anything.
Right.
In her heart, she's always going to be a true and trusted Jedi, even though she doesn't identify with the Order, the Jedi Order. Yeah.
All right. So obviously that was a good way to kick off the series. I don't even call it a series. It was like a mini series. So moving on to
an anthology.
Right. So episode 2 was called Justice.
Yeah, so episode 2, like we mentioned earlier, this series, Tales of the Jedi, ended up being released in chronological order. So rather than us do 3 episodes of Ahsoka, now we get the first Count Dooku episode. The brief synopsis for episode 2, Justice, is that 2 Jedi are dispatched to resolve a hostage situation on a distant planet. And before we get into it, I don't know about you, Pete, but like I knew we were gonna get a lot of Dooku story that we hadn't seen, but good lord, do I just sympathize for Count Dooku now? Yeah. I feel like so terrible, like possibly even more than Anakin, because at least Anakin was the end game, like that was the Emperor's like choice the entire time, but Dooku was just like a true like middleman who was used and abused. But let's not get too far just yet.
Okay.
Obviously, that analysis is coming from these 3 episodes that we see of Dooku. I really love this first episode. It escalates so quickly from the get-go. We see Dooku and a young Qui-Gon Jinn, who is voiced by Liam Neeson's son. I unfortunately forget his name. My apologies for that. They're dispatched to a planet to, like I mentioned, to resolve a hostage situation. So what they encounter is the villagers have captured the senator's son. And of course, basically, Dooku and Qui-Gon recognize this as wrong, but the villagers proceed to explain they had no choice. Their senator's not taking care of the people. They're deprived. They're hungry. They did this because if they don't do anything, they're gonna die, basically. So Dooku and Qui-Gon immediately realize, like, well, wait a minute, like, the hostage situation is not the issue. It's the root cause issue is the senator.
Right.
So right away you see them sympathize for them. Even so to the point when the villagers take them to the prisoners explain to the son, hey, your dad, is starving us. We're the way we are because of your father. And the son sympathizes for them. He's not like, no, you're wrong, get me out of here, you took me against my will. He was very much on the side of the villagers. So sure enough, the senator shows up with an army to rescue the son, and Dooku confronts him and says, what you're doing is wrong. So of course the senator just wants his son back. There ends up being a gunfight. Several villagers unfortunately lose their lives, but biggest takeaway from the scene is that Dooku gets so emotional that sure enough, he starts force choking the senator. And you see Qui-Gon try to step in and stop him. He kind of force pushes Qui-Gon back, but he is able to come to his senses and he releases the hold on the senator. And there's just basically this long conversation on how he's telling the senator what you're doing is wrong. we're Jedi. We're supposed to protect the people. I don't care that you're a senator. I don't think that it really resolves. Basically, the son has to step in and explain to the senator what he's doing wrong, and that's kind of how the conflict dies. He does end up leaving, and the son ends up promising the villagers that he's going to help them, and this is not going to continue. But right away, I just started sympathizing for Dooku, because clearly he's just trying to do the right thing in this episode, even though he does harness the dark side when he force chokes the senator. It was for the right reasons.
if there ever is a right reason to harness the dark side, this would be it. But yeah,
no, I was just gonna chime in. I'm a Thanos sympathizer, you guys. I'm sorry. So when I saw this scene, I was like, oh my god, Dooku's Thanos. Like, he's doing it for the right reasons. He's just doing it the wrong way.
Right. No, that was badass to I don't know, that's so stupid. I know that I'm watching a cartoon, but like when he starts force choking him, I was like, I like gasped. I was like, oh my god, like, yes. I was like, this is it. This is where he turns.
You channeled your Palpatine voice and you're like, do it.
Do it. Yes.
So when we saw that episode, I knew this was the beginning of the fall of Count Dooku, and I knew it was gonna be shown over these next 3 episodes. So you want to jump to the next episode?
Sure. Next one's episode 3. It's called Choices. And this one is basically Jedi Master Count Dooku and Mace Windu investigate the mysterious death of one of their own.
So in this episode, we see Dooku and Windu are sent off to work together to investigate the death of Master Khatri, who we haven't ever seen or met in any Star Wars content, but apparently she had a seat on the Jedi Council. And very similar situation, they go to Raxus, I believe that's the name of the planet, which ends up being the capital of the Separatists. Just FYI. So they get there, and the senators basically telling them, I don't remember how exactly he said Khatri died, but Dooku immediately picks up on evidence on the scene, like, wait a minute, like Khatri was shot down from this side, which is where you would be with your troopers,
right? And
right away the senator confesses to them that it was his soldiers that shot the master down, and at which point those soldiers execute him.
Right.
So Dooku and Mace get into a fight with the soldiers, and the soldiers end up confessing, we did kill Khatri because our senator was mistreating our people, and it was the only way we were going to get the attention of the order. I don't remember exactly who they said, so that's why they did what they did. And when Mace hears this, he's like, well, we need to report it to the Jedi Order so that they can tell us what to do. And Dooku's like, basically says, why would we do that? We know what happened. We need to investigate this now. Exactly in the same manner that he was addressing the issue with the villagers and the senator in the first episode, he's wanting to do the same thing here, and Mace is like, that's not going to happen. So I believe that conversation was pre-fight. The events play out the way they do. Dooku even ends up killing one of the soldiers.
Yeah.
But more importantly, they go back to the order and they report the information. They have a funeral for Khatri. They end up taking the remains back there, and we end up finding out that Mace is given Master Khatri's seat on the council, and Dooku asks him about it, and Mace basically tells him it's because when we were there investigating, I followed the code of what we were supposed to do, and you didn't.
Right.
And I kind of took that almost like similar to Anakin's when he's given the rank of, or rather when he's allowed to sit on the council but not given the rank of master.
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of saw it the same way, in that I don't think Dooku necessarily valued the seat more so than recognize what makes
position.
Everything wrong. Yes, what makes everything wrong with what the Jedi Council stands for, which is I don't know if it was in this episode or the previous episode. They said that the Jedi are puppets of the senators. They follow this. They do the bidding of the Senate, not of the people. And Dooku's like onto this early on. So you can definitely tell Dooku's heart is in the right place, and he's just given a smorgasbord of everything that's wrong with the Order, and that's leading to his downfall.
And it was just great to see Mace Windu back. I just love that character, and I really hope that if they make another run of these series, that we get some Mace Windu backstory, because there's a lot of meat left on that bone too.
I'm a big hater of characters that are Jedi that are oblivious to common sense, so I'm not a big Mace Windu fan.
I got you.
So anytime he's like messing up, I'm like, that's right, I knew all along. I don't like this guy. It just further validates my logic towards certain characters.
Yeah, that's true. I could see that. Okay, so moving on to episode 4, it's called The Sith Lord. And in this one, Count Dooku discovers something troubling that leads to him doubting the Jedi Order. This one was
the episode.
Yeah, this one was a badass episode.
This has to be my favorite episode of the entire series. My apologies to my favorite character, Ahsoka, but this one, man, did we get so much in the 15 minutes that it was, or however long it was.
Yes.
So first and foremost, I love that they included the scene that confirms that Dooku is the one that erased his Camino from the archives, posing as Master Cypher Diaz, which I thought was an incredibly confusing plot point in Attack of the Clones. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that they cleaned that up and just showed you straight up that he's the one that did it. And what I also really loved about this episode, there's so many things. I was not expecting the timing of it, the way that it intertwined with the Phantom Menace.
Yes.
I was blown away to find out that Count Dooku is a Jedi, basically through the Phantom Menace all the way up to Qui-Gon's death, his funeral.
Right. Because basically, when we meet him in the live action movie, it's in the second one. It's in Attack of the Clones.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, he is not full-fledged. He hasn't come out, I guess, as a Sith Lord yet. He's still kind of in hiding, like in plain sight. At least that's what I got from it when he was, it wasn't until Yoda outs him basically and calls him what he is. So yeah, it made sense to me that he was still within the Jedi Order, walking around freely within the temple and whatnot, within the council during the Phantom Menace era of the movies. Yeah,
nonetheless, though, I think the fact that we don't see him until Attack of the Clones, I think it just makes you assume certain things.
Yeah.
You see him show up and as a viewer, oh, he's a Sith. But like in the movie, if you remember, it's exactly like what Pete's saying. Like, not even Obi-Wan knew. Nobody knew. It wasn't until Yoda ousted him. And that's officially when he became, Darth Tyrannus. So the other thing I really liked about the episode was... Yeah, obviously this is a Yaddle episode too. Yaddle's is the female version of Yoda, who we see briefly in Phantom Menace, but we don't necessarily know. Yaddle does leave the council, and we never knew why. And sure enough, in this Tales of the Jedi, they tell us, because what ends up happening is Yaddle has a very deep, long conversation with Dooku when Qui-Gon dies. And Yaddle sympathizes for Count Dooku, and she sympathizes for him so much that she leaves the Jedi Order because of everything Dooku is preaching that's wrong with it. She agrees with it. Mm-hmm. And I want to interrupt there. Tidbit, guys, if you didn't know, Yaddle ends up being voiced by Bryce Dallas Howard, who is quickly becoming Star Wars royalty.
Yeah. Well, now that I had that on my notes here, but now that you mentioned that, what were your thoughts on Yaddle being a Yoda-like creature that did not speak in the Yoda backwards voicing? Like, I would have just assumed that they would have had these, like, this is a character trait of all of these creatures of this species. What was your thoughts on that?
It's something that I've been thinking about. I don't have an answer for it. I think it kind of makes Yoda more unique and fun, so to say. I don't know why he chose to speak that way, but I think it's definitely gonna clear up some questions for the moment that Grogu starts talking.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just something
Yeah.
that jumped out at me.
I think I kind of just enjoyed Yaddle speaking normally.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how. Did you want her to talk the same way as Yoda? Or what
I
did
was
you
just,
think?
I guess I was expecting it. Like,
Yeah,
she didn't have to, I guess, put on the oh voice, but you know, at the very least to like interchange the sentence structure. I would have popped for that. That would have been cool.
so yeah, I gotta agree. I think I know for sure nobody was expecting that, so it was definitely a complete surprise to everybody. But getting back to the episode, after that conversation they have that Yaddle has with Dooku, we see Dooku sneak off, sure enough, to meet up with the Emperor. And I don't remember why Yaddle follows him, but she does nonetheless, and she sees and hears the entire conversation. So Yaddle is basically the first to know that Dooku is the Emperor's apprentice, and the Emperor is basically the reason for the war. He's controlling both sides. So she ends up confronting him, and we get kind of like a do or die scene where is Count Dooku now going to become a Sith Lord, or is he going to stay a Jedi? Because at this point he has his hands in both cookie jars, I guess so to say.
Yeah.
And Dooku ends up, sure enough, fighting Yaddle. And I thought the scene was so intense because Dooku ends up winning the fight that we perceive to be at a certain point when he seemingly crushed Yaddle. And I was just like, oh my goodness, like what a disturbing way to die. Like it wasn't with a lightsaber strike. He just like crushed her with that door.
Right.
And I thought it was over then and there. And sure enough, like we see Yaddle's strength in the Force. She picks up the door that had just like apparently crushed her. She kind of rolls out and she gives some final words to Dooku, which I wish I remember. I wished I wrote down. I did not. But Dooku looks at her, and basically that's the moment he becomes a Sith Lord, because rather than help her after she's, down and defeated, he gives her the final strike and puts her at peace. The conversation involved talk of peace, and Yaddle basically telling Dooku it's not too late. Like this is not you're not far gone. Like we can fix this.
Yeah.
And apparently he doesn't want to fix it, but he doesn't want to fix it because of everything we've seen in the previous episodes. And that moment like really made the hairs on my arm stand up, because I was like, man, like this guy is just being fully controlled by Emperor Palpatine, and to me he's innocent in my point of view.
Man, this is turning you to the dark side, my friend. And just a couple notes that I had was like, it was really cool to see Dooku's lightsaber that was not red, but the same hilt, the same curved hilt that I love, but it was blue. My other note was, holy shit, I needed a cigarette and a nap after this episode, and I don't even smoke. It was like, wow. I was like, whoa, dude, like for real.
That episode was so intense.
Yeah.
Easily my favorite one.
It was excellent. Excellent episode. So moving on to episode 5. Tell me.
Practice Makes Perfect is the name of the episode. And in this episode, we see Anakin put Ahsoka through a rigorous training exercise to prepare her for an uncertain future. This one was the shortest episode by far. I believe it was only 12 minutes. So, yeah. Nonetheless, I thought this had to have been the most well-designed episode of all of them, even though I feel like the least amount of things were happening. But basically, to kick off the episode, we see a young Ahsoka, who isn't wearing a tube top anymore, by the way. Dave Filoni, thank you for fixing that.
They fixed it, yeah.
They fixed it, yeah. We see her training against droids, the remote droids that shoot the lasers that Jedi typically train with. She's in a training room. Anakin Skywalker is not there, even though he's supposed to be. He's running late. And we just see her slaughter these droids with flying colors. And it was really cool because the Jedi administering the training was Master Terrace Anube, who we know we've spoken about before. He's the master that helped Ahsoka find her lost lightsaber in an early Clone Wars episode. Mm-hmm. And what's also awesome about the scene is that we get an appearance by Depa Billaba and a young Kanan Jarrus, who is in the room watching the test, and you see Kanan just astonished by how Ahsoka is just like so good at, you know, her lightsaber skills.
Right.
So Anakin finally shows up. Of course, he missed the bulk of the training. Ahsoka's upset, and they have a conversation afterwards. Obviously, Ahsoka's disappointed Anakin missed the training, and Anakin says, "Look, that doesn't matter. That training's basically worthless. Like, you want some real training? You're my apprentice. I'm gonna train you to be ready." So he administers a training of his own, where the lasers are being shot, or rather the blaster being shot by clone troopers, Rex's troopers to be specific. So he takes her off to a training facility, and sure enough, the rest of the episode we just see her fail and fail and fail. The blaster set to stun, so she gets knocked out. They have to wait a bit. She gets back up. They do the test again and again and again and again. So after she finally starts getting the hang of it, there's a time jump to, I believe, the time frame between season 3 and 6 of Clone Wars. We see an older Ahsoka, and she's still doing the same training. Mm-hmm. And Rex, it's either Rex or Jesse that tells her, "You're getting better at this." And she's like, "Well, yeah, I mean, I've been trying to do it for so long, and to survive, so to say." Mm-hmm. And clearly this is building towards a moment that sure enough, we see at the end of the episode. And at the end, we time jumped to Clone Wars season 7, the Siege of Mandalore, where this is post Order 66. They're on the ship with the clones. The clones are going to attack her and Rex, and we see Rex say, basically, "Are you ready for this?" And Ahsoka basically says, "I've been training for this my entire life," so to say. So they walk into the room with the clones, which ultimately is the final scene of Clone Wars, where they have to, unfortunately, not kill their brothers, but not save them.
Right. Yeah.
So go ahead.
It was just so good to hear the original cast back together. Like, it was so good to hear Rex and Ahsoka and Anakin and Obi-Wan all in the same episode. It filled me with some nostalgia that I didn't know was missing.
Yeah, and so story-wise, we didn't get a lot, but like I said, I thought this episode was the best design one because of the way that it connects to what we've seen in the Clone Wars. So I thought it was a really, really well done episode. Yeah,
and I love that, like, the repetitive and almost hard-ass training that Anakin was putting her through by being continuously blasted by the troopers was kind of like, in a way, it was maybe subconsciously training her to survive Order 66, you know, like without him even knowing it, like training how to survive against, because there was a line specifically that made me think that, where he said, you know, training droids are uniform and like they all think one way. It's completely different when the attack is coming from something else or someone else or something you don't expect. Or however he worded it, he just made it seem like you have to be ready for anything. So subconsciously, he's the reason, and his training is what caused her to be one of the very few Jedi to survive. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's jump right into it. So this is the final episode of Tales of the Jedi. It was called Resolve. And the synopsis was, after Padme's death, we start at her funeral. After Padme's death, Ahsoka has to find a new way to live her life in a new galaxy.
Yeah, so right off the bat, the scene where we see Ahsoka at Padme's funeral, once again, raised the hairs on my arms. I was just like, oh my goodness, like, why are you torturing me like this? I thought it was really, really cool that we see Ahsoka putting her life at stake to attend her friend's funeral, and she has a meeting, or rather Senator Organa sees her there at the meeting. She vanishes, and he looks for her and finds her and basically tells her, you know, why would you put your life at stake to be here? Mm-hmm. And she tells them they were my friends, they referring to both Padme and Anakin. And basically the senator tells her, look, like, you need to disappear, you're not safe here. He gives her a communications device to let her know, when you're ready to join the battle again, you know, talk to me, which already tells you very, very quickly that Organa is one of the front runners in creating a rebellion. So I thought that scene was really, really awesome. Shortly after that, we time jump a bit. We see Ahsoka, now known as Ashla, living amongst villagers and on some other distant planet, and she's very much cutting herself off from the Force, the way we see Obi-Wan do in the Kenobi series. But unfortunately, because Ahsoka is the person that she is, she's put into a predicament where she sees somebody about to basically die, perish, and sure enough, she steps in and uses the Force to save her. This villager, she knows that her not dying was not by accident. She immediately recognizes that Ahsoka was the one that saved her and that she used the Force, and that Ahsoka's a Force wielder. So there's a scene where we see these workers. Ahsoka's part of this group of workers. They're talking about the Empire, and one of the guys that's part of the workforce, he says that the Empire's being there is good for them, and all the other villagers are telling them, like, no, that's not the case. Mm-hmm. So he is the Imperial sympathizer amongst these people. So at one point, we see the girl who Ahsoka saved go up to her and jokingly kind of refer to her as Master Jedi, and Ahsoka is like, you can't say that, like, it's not safe for me, please, don't tell anybody. And the guy who is the Imperial sympathizer, he overhears this conversation, and sure enough, he believes he's going to get rewarded for ousting a Jedi, so he calls the Empire, and the Empire sends what has to have been easily the coolest looking Inquisitor I've ever seen on screen. The Inquisitor, he basically destroys this village, lights it on fire. It's very dark. It's a very cool looking scene, but he does this because the Jedi is nowhere to be found when he's talking to the kid, and Ahsoka confronts him and says, no, there is a Jedi, it's me. So the Inquisitor recognizes her immediately, like, Ahsoka Tano, I'm gonna be rewarded for this discovery. Yeah. So obviously they knew Ahsoka wasn't necessarily dead. She might not be dead, rather. So they face off. Sure enough, Ahsoka has no sabers at this point. If you guys remember, she buried them at the end of Clone Wars to remain hidden. But that does not stop her from defeating this Inquisitor in seconds, disarming him of his saber and taking it from him and striking him down, fortunately saving the villagers. But she tells them, you guys aren't safe anymore, you have to relocate. So that's when she does contact Senator Organa as a favor to help them relocate the villagers. And I don't want to say that's the moment she joins the rebellion as Fulcrum, but I'm sure that is the beginning of the moment.
Right. And another little side note, ironically, what we were talking about, the universe talking to us, this Inquisitor was also voiced by Mr. Clancy Brown, who we just mentioned in last week's episode of Rebels. So another little message from the galaxy.
Yeah, and I don't want to ignore the obvious, guys. You guys have heard me talk about Ahsoka's novel by E.K. Johnston. This episode is somewhat of a replication of what happens in that book. It's not entirely exactly accurate, which is kind of unfortunate in some ways, but nonetheless, you can take it as a different interpretation. We are talking about Tales of the Jedi, so it has to be by the interpretation of somebody. Mm-hmm. But I still recommend you guys read the book. You do see this exact scene, not played out exactly the same way, but yeah, it was a pretty awesome episode, on its own nonetheless.
Right. Pretty awesome episode to end a pretty awesome mini-series that we were blessed with. So I really hope that there's more. I guess you can tell from us praising it so heavily that it was a fantastic piece of Star Wars animation. So if you guys haven't watched it, and if you've hung in this far, then sorry for all the spoilers, but I'm pretty sure that if you're listening, then yes, you've already watched it. So I can't wait for more. Hopefully there are more coming down the pipe. What do you think, Rolly? Any final thoughts?
Oh, I think we're definitely going to get more. I think the fan reaction to this is overwhelming. Everybody that's fans of the Star Wars animated series, they want as much of it as you can get, and I think this is a great way to get maybe stories that were written but weren't released. This is a great way to release them. And I personally, if you ask me, if I had to pick somebody I want more of now, I was talking to a friend of mine. I want a Tales of the Jedi for Kanan Jarrus. Yeah, based off of the backstory, how we saw Ahsoka's, I'd love to see that. What about you?
I do want more Mace Windu. I know that we had our disagreement earlier, but I would like to see a little bit more of him. Kanan would be a really good choice also. Maybe what's the character from the current video games? Cal Kestis,
yeah, that would be a good one too.
Or I mean, you during the Obi-Wan series, the Quinlan Voss was brought up, and he never got mentioned again, which was kind of a letdown. So maybe we'll get one of these little spin-offs for him. So something more in that realm.
Or Tales of the Sith. I'd love to see that too.
Hey. Now you're onto something there. So, if nothing else, then we're going to bring a close to this week's episode of Good Morning Lothal. Sorry we didn't talk very much Rebels, but we will get right back on it next week. Next week we'll be talking about Season 2, Episode 12, A Princess on Lothal. So before I let you guys go, once again, want to please remind everyone to like, share, subscribe, and rate. And question, comments, jump in the comments and leave us any feedback, anything that you might want to share with us. So if nothing else, this has been Pete Salas along with
Rolando Zamora,
saying, may the force be with you always. Goodbye from Lothal.